So, whining is a super common child misbehavior that most parents find beyond irritating. If you've got those incessant complaints, that high pitched tone that may seem like, I don't know, nails on a chalkboard for you, it can become a super frustrating experience for all, especially if you are a sensitive soul like me. So, in my mission of helping parents over the last 24 years navigate that stubborn child misbehaviors, I've come up with what I consider the top number one parenting tip that stops whining fast. So, make sure you stay on today. So I want to dive right in. Before we do so, please give this a thumbs up if you find this helpful. So most parenting experts these days, from gentle parenting to positive parenting, will talk about empathy or to ignore the whining as the top parenting tips. So you've likely tried a version of both, am I right? And the parenting tip wisdom behind using empathy is that it's key to creating a more peaceful home. And now that's part of it, and I agree with that part of it, but it definitely isn't going to solve all of it. If you have ever listened to your child ad nauseum and the whining still doesn't go away, there's got to be something more. Wouldn't you agree? And so while they may be saying things like make sure your child feels misunderstood, make sure your child doesn't feel misunderstood, or make sure that they are heard, the fact is that whining gets attention. Whining holds your attention sometimes. So by stepping into your child's shoes and just showing empathy, sometimes it can diffuse the situation, but sometimes it will only make whining worse. And so if your child is using whining to get attention, but more importantly, keep our attention, chances are you have got a strong-willed child in your midst, and it requires a lot more than just empathy. Now, empathy, again, is one side. We want to keep that side, but we also want to talk about another part. Before I go into that, is a lot of parenting experts talk about ignoring it. And while this definitely has some merit, the trouble is that if you are dealing with a particularly stubborn or strong-willed child who rarely gives up easily and has a knack for wearing parents down, then the problem is that with a stubborn child or strong-willed child, that just ignoring is not enough. A lot of times that will actually fuel an angry child cycle that has us all totally exhausted. So, drum roll, please. The number one parenting tip I know to stop a whining child in their tracks is really to marry the two philosophies. And I call it establishing standards, but with a compassionate heart. So, what does this look like? What do I mean by this? Well, first of all, let's break down standards. So, really, what you tolerate, you're going to have to put up with. So if you are giving in at times, giving them what they want when they are whining, if you're spending a lot of time with them when they're whining, even if it's like, stop whining, why do you need to do that? Even that is engaging with them. You're being part of the whining dance with them. So first of all, figure out your standards. Are you going to accept whining, or are you not going to accept whining? So if the rules in your home is that there's not whining, we have to make an important caveat to that. You can say, it's very different to say there's no whining in our house versus I won't accept whining. Do you hear the difference? One you can control and one you can't control. So you can't control whether your child whines or not. You can control whether you accept whining and engage with the whining. And I want to make sure that we are putting all our eggs in what we can control in that basket. Does that make sense? So to just come down and be like, we don't whine in this house, blah, 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 blah. Well, they're already whining. You can't control that. So pulling back a little bit, stepping back a little bit, and checking in. Your standards. That's what I want to make sure you're establishing. So if you don't accept whining, that's a whole different thing. So, oftentimes we'll start with the big thing. Let's say your child doesn't get the toy they want in the dentist and they start to whine. Freeze. Now, this whining is going to take a little bit of time, but it's not going to take a whole lot of time if you get really clear with what you accept and what you won't accept, and doing it with a compassionate heart. So, starting to deal with whining in public is one of the most difficult things. Why? Generally, because you're pressed, you're in a hurry, and you're embarrassed. You're in public, right? So, where I suggest you start is really taking a page out of a good guide or scout um, manual, which is be prepared. This means don't start trying to change whining on the same week your mom is going to go in for operation, or you're starting a new job, or you're going on vacation. Make sure that you've got a little bit of bandwidth so you can deal with it ahead of time to start putting these new standards in place. The next part of being prepared is to prepare them ahead of time. So let them know that, hey, I notice there's times where you choose to whine. Just to let you know that I'm not going to accept whining anymore. It's hard on my ears and I can't hear you as well. And I want to hear you from an open heart. So just to be clear that from now on, if you choose to use a whining voice, I'm happy to listen to you, but I will wait until you use your regular voice. Then you want to be sure that what you said has been heard. So you don't want to share this when it's right before bed and they're already exhausted or you're already exhausted, but it might be driving in the car when it's casual, things are going well, and just say, hey, just need to let you know so that they're aware. Then you want to check in and say, hey, just to be sure that we understood, what did you hear that I just said? So if you choose to whine, what am I going to do? You're right. I'm not going to engage with you. I'm not going to be listening to you at that time. Happy to do so when you use your regular voice. Now, where does the compassionate heart come in? This is really important, and it's similar to empathy, but it doesn't mean that you listen to them ad nauseum. It means that you have enough good, fun times in the bank with your child that will help, that when you withdraw, when things aren't going well, that you're going to be okay. This is such a critical piece because oftentimes we fall into this habit where we're not having any fun with our kids, where we're constantly coming down on them, we're constantly punishing them, we're constantly redirecting them, we're constantly frustrated, and we're constantly saying no. If this is what's happening in your house, they are going to fight you probably pretty much on everything. And that doesn't set up your family really to win together, to actually feel like you're coming alongside and being on the same team. If you're constantly at them, feeling like you need to be at them, and you may very well feel like you need to be at them because they are out of control or it's very chaotic right now. But if that's where you're coming from, you're just not going to get the success that I want for you and I also want for your child. So if whining is just one way that your child's behavior drives you crazy and you are exhausted with what you feel like is this endless struggle of strong-willed child fighting, rude behavior, talking back, not listening to you, I really want to make sure that you get the training you need to get your child to listen to you. Stubborn children are not like agreeable kids. They require an even higher standard of parenting. So if you haven't yet taken my training on how to get your child to listen, I highly recommend you go over to joyfullyparenting.com, sign up for this, and we can start right away. So appreciate you being here today. If you have any questions, let me know. How do you deal with whining? What is your number one top whining tip? I would absolutely love to hear it. Have a wonderful day. And if you haven't heard lately, thank you for all you do day in, day out as your child's parent. I know parenting your children is not a sprint, it is a marathon. And you, my friend, are doing the work because you're here. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.